Friendo here. So my previous video, linked below, got a lot of feedback, which is great. I really appreciate user response. So to begin with, yes, I'm fully aware this was not one of my better videos. So I certainly am willing to accept some criticism from MRAs in terms of how I present or how I phrase the argument, using the term reproductive rights instead of reproductive freedom. Okay, I understand. If you are part of a group that's advancing an agenda, you want to make sure that your argument is presented faithfully. I understand. So for any MRAs who thought that I was misrepresenting their position, intentionally or unintentionally, I'm sorry about that. It certainly was not my intent. However, in regard to the assertion that I presented a straw man, I don't think that's true at all. When you look at the objections that people are raising, what they're putting on the comment section, you see a recurring theme of saying women have this many options, men have zero. Women can do this, this, and this. Men can't do anything. And I'm afraid that that's the equality argument. The objection that John the Other is presenting is just nothing but sophistry, saying, well, it's called this, not called that. Right, but the logical content of his refutation is entirely the same as the argument that I presented. Women have this, that oppresses men. That's the argument purely in terms of logical content. And yeah, looking through the comment section, those continue to be the objections that MRAs make. And what this speaks to is just a complete misunderstanding, of juvenile understanding of what rights are. Looking at other people and saying, well, they get this. I gotta have it too. They have, I want. They have, I want. My not having represents some kind of a fundamental loss of rights. No, no, no. And here's the key. Speaking as someone who did not fail high school government, I can tell you what the relationship is between responsibilities and rights. That is, as a member of a civil society, you are entitled to the protections of society, what we call rights, so that you are free to do as you will in a way that is suitable to you based on your own self-determination. And society, whether it's the state, whether it's social institutions, or whether it's other citizens as individuals, cannot interfere with you. Those are rights. But rights don't come without responsibilities. Without responsibilities, we have no way of ensuring that we won't run into undue conflict in asserting our own self-determination. Civil society simply ceases to work. It isn't civil if no one understands or practices their responsibilities. So, for example, you have the responsibility to follow the laws in whatever jurisdiction you live in, all laws that apply to you. You don't have a choice in the matter, but you do enjoy the right of fair prosecution, due process. Responsibilities and rights go together. You have a responsibility to pay your taxes, but you have the right to enjoy social services. Now, when it comes to the issue of abortion, on the one hand, it's hard to talk about this as a right because it is not wholly unrestricted. Keep in mind, laws concerning abortion vary vastly from state to state. There's just a fundamental constitutional understanding, federal mandate, that states have to provide some sort of basic services and not interfere in the privacy of doctors. But apart from that, states have, even within the determination of Roe versus Wade, an interest in the life of the child. So as a pregnancy progresses and the fetus approaches viability, the state has a growing interest, a growing concern in the disposition of the pregnancy. Because once the child is born, it is entitled to its own rights, and its parents have responsibilities to it. If the parents do not practice those responsibilities, then the responsibilities are picked up by society at large. We have determined that we don't like a system that has orphanages as the primary means for children who've been abandoned by their parents to get along. That the state has to take the responsibility for children who've been cast aside. We don't like that system. We've moved past it. That's where child support comes from. Not from feminists trying to seek independence from men, but still leech resources out of them. I mean, I understand the narrative. It's just fucking crazy. That's the problem that I have with it. This idea of gender war, that there was a point when men were totally free, and, well, the laws have changed because the feminists want to take away all of our freedom and put us into cage. And it's fucking bullshit. The fact of the matter is, we don't want to live in a Dickens novel. As a society, we would far rather see that responsibilities for children are picked up by their parents. And it's incredibly selfish for someone to look at that and say, my rights are being violated by being told that I have a responsibility to my own offspring. Now, on the subject of abortion as a right that women have and men don't, this could be justified if women have responsibilities that men don't. And they do. Women can face prosecution for taking drugs or not abstaining from alcohol when pregnant. This is a legal responsibility. They can face prosecution in the form of a felony that can put them in jail for between 2 and 20 years. So the position that I set out in the last video is that this is an issue of body autonomy. That's the source of women's rights on the issue of abortion and reproduction. The point at which the fetus is developing within the mother's body, it is entirely an issue of her body. But as I pointed out, as the process continues and the child comes closer to viability, certain rights are extended to it. Protections are extended to it. This being one of them that creates a responsibility for women to follow, one with legal consequences. If you are giving someone a responsibility legally without giving them a right legally, then that is oppression. So this is the justification, legally speaking, for why women might have this right in a way that men don't. But in order to understand this, you have to take the considerations of the life of the child and its legal rights into concern. And people who fight the gender war simply don't want to see it that way. They want the issue to be either the man or the woman. Entitlement versus privilege, power versus power. And I just refuse that particular narrative. If I'm going to look at a law or a series of laws and make a determination on whether or not they're oppressive, I'm going to consider all of the avenues of social effect, how it affects people other than simply looking at their damn gender.
So to claim responsibility where there is no legal choice is a very, very slippery turn of phrase, and I reject the use of the word responsibility there unless it is legally chosen.
No. The consequences of pregnancy occur whether you want them to or not. This is not how responsibility works. Speaking from a civics standpoint, speaking from a legal standpoint, there is no kind of a right that people get only if they've decided to participate in the system. I'm sorry, but if you're a part of a civil society, then you have responsibilities. Now, there's a tangent, there's a corollary to this that affects the issue of whether or not men have responsibilities to childhood. And the answer here would be that you have no responsibilities in the beginning. You don't have to care for the woman. You don't have to live with her. You don't have to put up with her nagging, not based on her pregnancy. Your responsibility is to the child, not to her. As it continues to develop and gains rights pursuant to its viability, then you gain the responsibilities. Whereas for women, their responsibilities begin far sooner. So as their responsibilities develop, they lose the ability to cancel their pregnancy. Depending on the jurisdiction, there's a point at which the state has an interest in the life of the child, and in many cases has said, no, you no longer have the option of an abortion. And prosecution for taking drugs occurs far before that. With the statement that you have to willingly participate in this particular exchange in order to have responsibilities, doesn't understand the point of the responsibilities. When the child is born, then your responsibilities as a father begin. And the reason for it is the child's own rights. John is continuing to talk about this issue of pregnancy as if men have no agency or no control, that this is something that just falls out of the sky. Now, men do have reproductive rights, but just as the case with women, men's rights extend to their own bodies. So men have the right to freedom of coercion when it comes to sex. Men have the right to practice birth control, using condoms, getting surgery. Now, I'll address the issue of birth control for men in a little bit, but fundamentally, you have the right to have sex or not have sex. When you have sex, there is some chance that there will be a pregnancy. Always some chance. As long as you and her have any kind of fertility. But speaking in terms of birth control, there is always some kind of chance. And that is something that you have to accept as a responsible adult, as a participant in civil society. You need to understand this is a consequence. You can't simply say, oh, I didn't see that coming, so now I'm going to make the choice whether or not I want to participate in the consequences. No, the fact of the matter is the consequences are there at pregnancy. Now, this is important to understand because of the rights that fathers have. Visitation rights, rights to have a say in adoption status, rights to collect child support if that applies to them. Men have rights as fathers, and those rights go along with their responsibilities. The dangerous thing here is in men's rights activism and advocacy of pushing the position that men have no fundamental responsibilities to their children unless they want to. That means that men have no fundamental rights in regards to their children. And see, that's just the thing. Rights and responsibilities, these don't represent legal choices on your part. They come from being in society. Just as you can't select to not do jury duty, you face consequences for doing so, for failing to acknowledge that responsibility. You run the risk of the consequences of failing to acknowledge the responsibility that you have to your offspring. This applies to women and it applies to men. To say that responsibilities require choice is to say that there's no such thing as responsibility.
There's even abandonment.
Child abandonment is a felony. Presenting this as a legitimate option for women is like saying that men have the option of pushing a woman down the stairs or otherwise causing her to have a miscarriage. It's a dumb as shit argument. Saying that this is the equivalent of women having the right to have an abortion.
No. It's not the equivalent. It's a parallel.
Same fucking thing. The difference that you're drawing here is purely pedantic.
Women have the right to abort a child, but abortion is just a special case of abandoning a pregnancy.
No, it's not, by any sane ethical standard. What does this mean, abandoning a pregnancy? Like, you take the pregnancy, put it aside until it starves to death? Abortion is the termination of a pregnancy. It means there will be no child support payments, no hungry mouth to feed, no misery or human suffering, and no responsibilities to the father, to the mother, to the state, to society in general, and no rights for the child because it hasn't approached viability. Those are the legal and ethical standards. The consequences of an abortion and the consequences of abandoning a child have no material connection. So drawing these two as a parallel or equivalent or whatever fucking word you want to use for it is absolutely, totally asinine. It's philosophically, ethically, and morally indefensible.
And so it's important to use words precisely and not create these false equivalences on which we build an argument, and then that equivalence proves false and your whole argument falls down.
It's also important to pay attention what the person is saying when you're doing a video response to them. So I go on here to present a radical feminist position that I see as a parallel to this. And John goes on to respond to it as if this is my argument, right? I'm clearly stating, here's this MRA position I disagree with, and I see it as parallel to this radical feminist position. You would assume that I therefore disagree with the position that I then present as the radical feminist position. My subscribers seem to get this. The people who comment on my videos seem to get it. Did anyone in your echo chamber bother to point out that you fucked this part of your video up? Someone who's accusing me of misrepresenting your entire argument. I love this. You go on to just totally screw up your response to this part of my video. I'm presenting the parallel to say, I reject all assertions that we have to legislate based on balancing gender dimorphism. That's my position. But I don't know how you missed that, how you turn this around of, here's an argument that I disagree with, I see as parallel to this other argument I disagree with. And you start responding to me like it's my argument. You need to pay closer attention, man.
Protected from predation by men has two assumptions, both of which I reject entirely.
As do I, which is why I presented this solely for the purpose of demonstrating an argument that I reject. That women's safety should be some primary concern.
This is the feminist argument, right?
Nothing. Yeah. Oh, you've noticed that I'm drinking coffee. You're so observant. But see, the thing of this is a visual cue. And most people, certainly my subscribers, but most people would see the coffee and think, well, this is just a guy thinking out loud. This is not a scripted response. This isn't directly in reply to anyone. This is the first thing in the morning. The guy has gotten up, had breakfast, had a shower, and now he's talking to his camera while he has a coffee. Now, maybe that doesn't make any difference to you whatsoever, but this is a nice parallel, a metaphor for your entire philosophy. You see things, but you fail to understand their significance. You show no understanding or comprehension of why they are there. As men, we have no enormous flush of hormones into our systems.
Men actually do have a hormonal response to pregnancy,
but it doesn't address my point. Yes, there's a change in hormones, primarily decrease in testosterone, and then increase in estrogen and estradiol. But so what? It doesn't have the effects on men that it has on women. Women have physical changes in pregnancy. That's the point. See, that issue of significance. You're responding to literally what I said without responding to the point that I'm making.
The interesting thing about all this burden of pregnancy for women, which I don't debate that it's true, is that it's chosen by women. It's a choice.
Not always. And since this is a fundamental premise to your argument, this is a pretty serious error on your part. I mean, speaking ideally, I can see where you're coming from, but there's the issue of pregnancy as the result of rape. There's the issue of failure of various birth control methods. No method is 100%. The understanding that you're presenting here of birth control is incredibly simplistic. Even tubal ligations and vasectomies can reverse themselves. So what do you call it if the man had a vasectomy and that was the birth control the couple was relying upon? His vasectomy reversed itself. Or if they both had surgery and both surgeries reversed themselves. Unlikely, yes, but you would still call that her choice to get pregnant? If a woman is raped and becomes pregnant, you're still saying it's her choice? I mean, you understand that there are at least some circumstances where we are talking about a woman not making a choice whatsoever. Are you saying that if the condom breaks, she made the choice to get pregnant? So this is just it. This is the thing. You don't make a choice to get pregnant. It's not some conscious thing that women do. They don't will their bodies into pregnancy. But the way you're presenting this argument simply doesn't take this into account. Sperm meet egg. It's a biological process. That's how pregnancy occurs. Women and men can practice various forms of birth control to reduce the likelihood, or forms of fertility treatment to increase the likelihood, but ultimately getting pregnant is not the choice. So I really think that renders this particular argument totally incoherent. But when it comes to the issue of pregnancy, we see that it's something that is, forgive the use of the word here, inflicted upon women.
I do not forgive the use of that word.
Oh, and I'm crying about that.
It is not inflicted on women. Pregnancy is chosen. It's a choice. It's the product, usually, of sex. But to say that it is inflicted on women is to imply that women do not have volition or intelligence or personal agency.
Look, I feel the same way about your entire argument in regards to men. Saying that men make no choice when it comes to women's pregnancy totally strips men of their volition, of their consent, of their participation in the matter. Women don't get pregnant by themselves. Men help. Men have the option of supporting or abandoning.
Actually, men do not have the legal right of abandonment.
And neither do women. As I pointed out earlier, child abandonment is a felony. Now, you're probably referring to safe haven laws. So let's take a look at safe haven laws. Nerdy Dancing left a comment that received massive great reviews saying, When women abandon their children, we call it safe haven. And that entirely misunderstands what safe haven laws are. When I went further into conversation with her, she understands what these laws are for, what the problem is that they intend to address. That is, there's a critical window, a critical period where women in dire straits are under the most stress, where they are more likely to kill their children. And these laws were enacted on a state-by-state basis as a way of attempting to avoid that human tragedy, of giving, sometimes it's the birth mother, sometimes it has to be the birth mother, but laws like in New York, it doesn't have to be the birth mother. The father can give it up. A representative of the parents can give up the child for adoption. And women who exercise these safe haven laws, depending on the state, can face prosecution for child abandonment. So this hardly constitutes a right. And that wasn't what I was saying either. I used the word option. But what you're saying about women's rights are simply legally incorrect. Depending on the circumstances, if a woman puts a child up for adoption, she has to tell the court, she has to inform the court who the biological father is, so the father can be informed. When informed the child is being put up for adoption, he can sign away all of his legal rights, or he can sue for custody. Now, the process isn't always fair, the process isn't always clean, but family law is a dirty thing. All that I can say on the subject is society is a lot worse off without family law. It's our attempt to somehow rationally, legally, fairly put things back together from the wreckage of people's failed relationships and the social consequences that they bring about. Now, if you can handle your own shit, if you can work things out with your baby mama, and you don't have to get the courts involved, don't have to get society involved, then I'm all for that. But I understand why this system exists, where these laws come from. And I also understand that the very limited provisions of safe haven laws in no way constitute some sort of broad sweeping right of abandonment, as you put it here.
And what we're arguing for is legal rights. Because how can you have a legal responsibility to something that you do not have a legal choice to participate in?
Because that's how legal responsibilities work. It's not a matter of choice. It's a matter of the laws pertaining to you in the jurisdictions that you live in a civil society. Sorry.
Because if you're going to say you made your choice when you pulled your dick out, well, the corollary to that is to say to a woman, well, you made your choice to have a child when you spread your legs. And anybody who said that would be simply laughed out of the room.
Well, as a response to an individual who's in a hard spot, yeah, it's a really shitty thing to say. But as a matter of fact, I think that people should be thinking about it before they do the deed. It should definitely be a part of people's thought process of understanding family planning and that pregnancy is a possible consequence of sexuality. This factors into education. I definitely think, not speaking to individuals who are struggling, but speaking in general, yeah, the kind of birth control that's most effective is people thinking about it before they get their genitals exposed.
They have the legal right to fertility control drugs or fertility control technology. There was a male birth control pill, and it got slapped down by guess who? The National Organization for Women.
So I would argue that men do, in fact, have a right to access to birth control. Primarily today, this is condoms. But I'm willing, I'm willing to accept the concept of equality on this, that everyone has a fundamental right to reproduce or not reproduce. I believe that. I argue for that. I think that is good advocacy. The pill is a cottonseed extract called Gossypol. And there's a lot more to the issue of its introduction to the market than now. The chemical continues to see clinical trials. It's being tested. Dr. Coutinho continues to do studies to try to find the right dosage. The main problem is that it causes sterility, irreversible sterility, after you've been using it for too long. Gossypol has toxicity. In high enough concentrations, it leads to a variety of problems. Nervous problems. For example, it causes potassium deficiency. Weakness is reported, but the symptoms are incredibly unpredictable. And I think that's at least as credible an explanation for why the pill has not seen widespread use. The FDA takes issues like predictability and side effects quite seriously. And regardless of what any MRAs want to say on the subject, Gossypol is unpredictable and has side effects, potentially serious side effects. I'm going to link an abstract down below. It is Dr. Coutinho's position that you can find the right dosage if you could find a way to get around the infertility problem, the fact that over a long enough period of time, this chemical has the effect of sterilizing men, then you would really see widespread viability. But the argument he presents, that I think is a good argument, is in poorer countries, this is a reasonable replacement for surgical procedures. So men can take Gossypol instead of going under the knife for a vasectomy, and that's a reasonable alternative, right? Because you're looking at the same consequences with a vasectomy, that is long-term sterility. Now, I am receptive to the argument that slap a warning label on it. You know, as a man, I'll take it. I'll take the responsibility for the consequences. You know, the long-term sterility or weakness or fatigue or whatever. I'll take those consequences. But understand, the FDA takes this seriously, and the drug that you're talking about is really not at the point where it's safe for the general population. There are problems with it. But in terms of more attention to the matter, of pushing for more birth control options for men, I certainly do support that. I think Dr. Coutinho is fighting the good fight, and I really do support him in what he's doing. More birth control is better, period, bar none. Even if women are already using birth control, if men have access to the same, I don't see any downside to it, provided we're talking about techniques that are safe, which Gossypol really isn't.
Your continued reference to the word equality is increasingly leading me to believe that you are significantly detached from what the actual arguments are.
I rewatched my video and I did a word count. I could be off by 1 or 2, but I used the word equality 5 times. I used the word rights 19 times. So if you think I'm overusing the word equality, that says a lot more about you than it does about me. But hey, maybe that just comes from the fact that you skipped over the entire part of the video where I directly addressed rights, what they are, what my position is on them. Maybe that's where it's coming from. Mothers do not have the legal right to just abandon their children.
Yes, actually they do.
No, actually they don't. There are some very limited laws that allow women to give their children up at a safe place, provided the child is young enough. We're talking about newborn infants. So the child will then be put up for adoption, and the mother can still face prosecution depending on the jurisdiction. So no, women do not have the right to abandon their child. That's fucking legal incompetence.
Is this a troll video?
Fuck off.
Caregivers of their children can sue their mothers for child support. Oh, absolutely. Yes, they can. Would you like to consider how much enforcement there is of court-ordered child support when it comes from the mother?
Well, enforcement is pretty low overall, but looking at the Census Bureau, comparing the numbers from 1994 to 2002, out of custodial mothers receiving full child support, it's 36.8%. Among custodial fathers receiving full child support, it's 37.2%. So it's about the same between men and women who are receiving their money, men and women who aren't. This is an area for activism, right? And Beach has criticized you in the past for not understanding how activism works, of how it is that you would actually get any positive change in the world. You're ideologically committed to fight a gender war. So you don't even see this as the opportunity that it is. Here's where you can advocate for a position where the law is on your side. But the problem here is that, statistically speaking, I don't see any edge that women have over men. Looks to me like the system here is fairly equal.
You live in an ideal bubble or something?
No, what I do is I reject the concept of gender war. I reject the concept of looking out there at the world and saying, all of the personal problems that I've experienced are the result of some nameless, faceless, shapeless other. And I'm just going to take the face and the image of people who've hurt me and slap it onto that to try to make some abstract, esoteric concept the enemy, to tell a narrative, putting a single word on all the problems and saying, this is the thing that we need to fix, this is the thing that we need to get rid of. No. Instead, I try to look at all of these individual issues as they are, as individual issues. Now, yes, they're all part of a whole, but their relationship is far more complicated than you're making it out to be. Almost every point that you've made, almost every issue that has been brought up in this exchange, you have dealt with at absolutely the most ludicrously juvenile manner. You want to take everything and feed it into a narrative, and it makes sense to you because you live in a bubble. You are in an echo chamber where no matter how poorly supported any argument you make is, your supporters are going to love you for it. Now, as I've said, my video wasn't the best I've done, and there's certainly room to accept criticism. I'm no expert in family law. If anyone thought that I was presenting myself as such, I'm not. As I said in the previous video, I'm just a citizen. But God, I'm at least going to look things up. Now, if I thought that I was wrong on these points, I would say so. But the reading that I've done has led me to conclude that my position isn't incorrect. My understanding of these issues isn't incorrect. The information leads me there. I step outside of whatever fucking bubble I might have around me, and you don't.
Let's say we're gay lovers, okay?
Now you're talking. All right, I'm game.
Abandon their children. That's begging the question again. Their children. You're implying responsibility, but you're not addressing the matter of choice.
Choice is irrelevant to the subject of responsibility. We have determined as a matter of our society that parental rights and responsibilities are biologically connected. you're the father, those responsibilities and rights go to you.
I'm talking about special financial commitments, like the earlier example I gave of buying a boat.
Boats don't have civil rights. Children do. Child support payments are for the children. It is their civil rights that are under consideration. And in cases where the child support is not collected, then the burden falls on the state and we all pick up the bill. See, that's what responsibility means. If you walk away from it, then the consequences are endured by other people. It's an act of selfishness. You're the one that did it. The consequences exist whether you admit to them or want them or not. So it's up to the courts to determine what is fair in appropriating the responsibilities of the action. Otherwise, we all end up paying for it. So, in conclusion, I remain unimpressed. There's no philosophically justifiable concept of what rights are or what responsibilities are, and that's what it all rests on. And as far as the lemmings who are commenting to tell me how full of lies my video was, all I can say is congratulations on your devotion to the Glenn Beck of YouTube.
That's, I mean, honest to fuck Christ.